On the morning of March 12, 2024, in a quiet townhouse nestled in the Chestnut Hill neighborhood of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the life of the Sullivan family changed forever. Lucas Sullivan, a boy of just 5 years old with deep brown eyes and jet black hair, woke up at exactly 6 a.m. with a scream that pierced through the silent house. His mother, Catherine Sullivan, a 32-year-old elementary school teacher, rushed into his room, expecting to comfort him after an ordinary nightmare. But what she found stopped her dead in her tracks. The boy was sitting on the floor, surrounded by countless sheets of paper, drawing feverishly with crayons. His small hands moved with a precision that was unsettling for a child his age. He was sketching faces of people, faces that looked real, alive, and detailed down to the smallest features. These weren't the scribbles of a 5-year-old. They were portraits. Catherine knelt beside him and gently asked what he was doing. Lucas looked up, tears streaming down his cheeks, and said something that made his mother's blood run cold. "Mommy, Jesus is already here. He never left. He's living among us, and I have to find him." Catherine tried to calm him down, assuming this was somehow connected to the Sunday school classes at their local parish, Sacred Heart Church. But Lucas was insistent. He pointed at the drawings and repeated that these faces were important, that one of them was him. Over the following days, the boy's behavior escalated in ways that deeply troubled his parents. He refused to play with his toys. He barely ate. He spent hours drawing the same faces over and over again, as if possessed by some invisible force compelling him to capture every detail. His father, Stephen Sullivan, a 35-year-old auto mechanic, grew seriously concerned when Lucas began describing impossible details about the man he was searching for. "He has scars on his hands," Lucas said one evening at dinner, his food untouched. "He speaks an ancient language that nobody understands, and he helps people without them ever knowing it was him." Stephen exchanged a worried glance with Catherine. Their son had never shown interest in religious imagery beyond what any child his age might encounter. Yet here he was, describing someone with the conviction of a witness, not a dreamer. The sleepless nights began to take their toll on the family. Lucas would wake up at exactly 3:33 a.m. every single night, never a minute earlier, never a minute later. He claimed he heard a voice calling him, urging him to continue his search. Catherine started keeping a journal, documenting every incident, every drawing, every word her son uttered about the mysterious man. By the end of the first week, they had collected over 60 drawings. All of them depicted men who appeared to be between 30 and 35 years old. Some had beards, some were clean-shaven, but they all shared one common feature: a profound serenity in their eyes, a peace that seemed to transcend the paper itself. The family decided to seek medical help. They brought Lucas to Dr. Thomas Walker, a pediatrician at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, hoping for some rational explanation. A fever dream, perhaps, or some form of childhood anxiety manifesting in unusual ways. Dr. Walker conducted a thorough 3-hour examination. He tested Lucas's cognitive functions, checked for signs of trauma, screened for hallucinations and psychological disorders. The results came back clear on every count. Lucas Sullivan was physically and mentally healthy. But the doctor remained troubled. He asked to see the drawings, and what he saw left him speechless. The shading techniques, the proportional accuracy of the facial features, these were not the work of a 5-year-old. These were near photographic portraits of real people, people that no one in the family recognized. "I've been practicing medicine for 22 years," Dr. Walker told the parents privately. "I've never seen anything like this. His motor skills alone shouldn't allow for this level of detail. It's as if someone else is guiding his hand." And through it all, Lucas kept repeating the same sentence. "I have to find him before it's too late." The story of Lucas eventually reached Father John Richardson, a 58-year-old priest with 40 years of service in the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. Father Richardson was known among his colleagues for his skepticism toward claims of miracles and supernatural phenomena. He had investigated dozens of alleged apparitions and healings over his career, and not once had he found evidence that couldn't be explained by psychology, coincidence, or outright fraud. But something about the Sullivan case intrigued him. Perhaps it was the medical reports confirming the boy's mental health. Perhaps it was the drawings themselves, photographs of which had been forwarded to him by a concerned parishioner. Whatever the reason, Father Richardson agreed to visit the family on March 19th. When he entered the Sullivan home that afternoon, Lucas ran up to him immediately, clutching a stack of papers. The boy presented 23 different drawings, all depicting men who appeared to be in their early 30s. Father Richardson examined each image carefully, and he noticed something that sent a chill down his spine. Despite being different individuals, all the faces shared that same quality he had seen in the photographs: a tranquility in their expression, a peace that seemed almost otherworldly. During their conversation, Lucas described specific details about the man he was searching for. He spoke of someone who worked with wood, who lived in extreme poverty, who refused money when he helped others, and who had visible scars on his wrists and feet. "He doesn't want me to find him, Father," the boy said with a maturity that seemed impossible for his age. "But I feel like I have to." Catherine added that Lucas had been waking up at exactly 3:33 a.m. every night, always claiming to hear a voice urging him to continue searching. Father Richardson noted this detail carefully. In Christian tradition, 3:33 a.m. held significance. It was considered the inverse of 3:33 p.m., the hour traditionally believed to be when Christ died on the cross. Father Richardson decided to document the case thoroughly. He recorded 3 hours of interviews with the family and took the drawings to the University of Pennsylvania, where Dr. Elena Fisher, a psychologist specializing in child development, agreed to analyze the case. Dr. Fisher spent 2 weeks studying Lucas. She interviewed him multiple times, observed his behavior, and subjected the drawings to detailed analysis. Her conclusions were deeply unsettling. "This child shows no signs of external influence," she wrote in her confidential report. "He has not been exposed to intense religious imagery beyond what is normal for his age and cultural background. His drawing abilities exceed his chronological age by at least 7 years. This child is drawing from a source I cannot understand or explain." On April 2nd, Father Richardson presented the case to the Archbishop, who authorized a discreet investigation. But it was Catherine who made the decision that would change everything. She decided to let Lucas search for the man from his visions. "If this comes from God," she told Father Richardson, "then God will show us the way." Starting April 8th, 2024, Catherine and Stephen took their son through the streets of Philadelphia every afternoon after school. They walked through Old City, the pedestrian zones around Independence Hall, the shopping districts on Walnut Street. Lucas held his mother's hand and watched every face that passed by with intense concentration. The first 3 days yielded nothing. Lucas would look, shake his head, and keep walking. By the 5th day, Stephen began to lose patience. "This is madness, Catherine," he said one evening after another fruitless search. "We're parading our son through the city like he's some kind of I don't know what. People are starting to talk. and people were talking. The story had begun circulating in local Facebook groups and neighborhood apps. Some neighbors whispered that the Sullivans had lost their minds. Others wondered if the boy was genuinely touched by something divine. A few even started following them at a distance, hoping to witness whatever might happen. But Catherine refused to give up. She had seen something in her son's eyes, a certainty that went beyond childhood fantasy. This wasn't a game to Lucas. This was a mission. Day 6 passed. Then day 7. Each afternoon they walked for hours, and each evening they returned home with nothing. By day 9, even Catherine's faith began to waver. She watched her son scanning every face in the crowd, his small hand gripping hers tightly, and she wondered if she was doing the right thing. What if this was all just a phase? What if she was reinforcing some kind of delusion? On the 10th day, Lucas barely spoke. He walked in silence, his eyes moving from face to face with a desperation that broke his mother's heart. That night, he cried himself to sleep, whispering, "Why can't I find him? He's so close. I can feel him." Catherine held him until he fell asleep, tears streaming down her own face. She prayed for a sign, anything that would tell her whether to continue or to stop this search before it damaged her son further. The 11th day, April 18th, was cold and overcast. Stephen had refused to come, saying he needed a break from this whole circus. Catherine took Lucas alone, her heart heavy with doubt. They walked for 2 hours without incident. Catherine was about to suggest they go home when Lucas suddenly stopped. His grip on her hand tightened. "Tomorrow," he whispered. "He'll show me the way tomorrow." Catherine didn't know what to make of it, but she took him home and prayed through the night. Everything changed on April 19th at exactly 5:47 p.m. They were walking along Market Street toward City Hall when Lucas suddenly froze in front of an old soft pretzel vendor's cart. The vendor, a man of about 70 named George Bowman, sat on a small stool beside his cart. Lucas released his mother's hand and walked directly toward the old man. "Do you know the man with the marked hands?" the boy asked. George Bowman looked down at the child, and his eyes immediately filled with tears. His hands began to tremble. For a long moment, he couldn't speak. "Yes," he finally whispered. "Yes, my boy. I know him." Catherine rushed forward, her heart pounding. "What do you mean? Who are you talking about?" George Bowman wiped his eyes with a weathered hand. 3 months ago, my wife Maria was dying. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors at Jefferson Hospital had sent her home to die. They said she had maybe 2 weeks left. I had already started planning her funeral." He paused, his voice breaking. Then one evening in January, a stranger came to our door, a carpenter. He said he had heard about Maria and wanted to pray with her. I almost turned him away. I had stopped believing in God the day the doctors gave us the diagnosis. But something in his eyes, I couldn't say no. Catherine listened, frozen in place. Lucas stood perfectly still, watching the old man with an expression of profound knowing. "He went into her room," George continued. "He didn't say much. He just placed his hands on her head and prayed in a language I had never heard before. It sounded ancient, like something from another time. Then he left. He didn't ask for anything, no money, no thanks. He just left." "And your wife?" Catherine asked, her voice barely audible. George's face transformed. A smile broke through his tears. "The next morning, Maria woke up without pain for the first time in 8 months. She was hungry. She wanted to get out of bed. I thought maybe it was just a good day, you know? The doctors had said there might be good days before the end. He shook his head slowly. But the good days kept coming. 3 weeks later, we went back to the hospital for a scan, just to see how much time she had left. The doctors couldn't explain it. The tumor was gone. Completely gone. They ran the tests 3 times. They brought in specialists from Penn Medicine. Everyone said the same thing. There was no medical explanation for what had happened. George looked down at Lucas. The man who came to our house, he had scars on his palms. Perfect circles, like something had gone straight through his hands. Lucas nodded slowly. Where does he live? In Bethlehem, George said. In a small neighborhood on the south side. He has a carpentry workshop there, but he rarely goes out. He doesn't want to be found. Lucas took the old man's hand gently. He doesn't want people to search for him, but God asked me to find him. Can you take me to where he lives? The next morning, April 20th, the Sullivan family set out for Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, accompanied by Father Richardson and George Bowman. The historic town lay about 50 miles north of Philadelphia, but as they drove through the quiet streets, it felt like they were entering another world entirely. George guided them through tree-lined avenues into the South Side neighborhood, where old Moravian buildings and converted industrial spaces stood side by side. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of sawdust and old wood. At 10:30 a.m., they arrived at a small, nameless carpentry workshop tucked between a coffee shop and an antique store. The building was unremarkable. A worn wooden door, windows covered with simple white curtains, no sign or indication of what lay inside. It looked like a place that wanted to be forgotten. George knocked 3 times. No one answered. Catherine felt Lucas squeeze her hand with unusual strength. The boy was staring at the door, his body rigid with tension. "He's in there," Lucas whispered. "He's afraid because he knows what's coming." Father Richardson shifted uncomfortably. Stephen pulled out his phone, thinking he should document whatever happened next. But before he could open the camera app, the device shut off completely, despite showing 87% battery just moments before. 5 minutes passed in heavy silence. Then, slowly, the door creaked open. A man appeared in the doorway. He was about 5 feet 7 inches tall, with dark brown shoulder-length hair and a thick beard. He wore simple clothes, faded jeans, and a white cotton shirt covered in sawdust. His eyes were an unusual golden brown color, and his face carried an expression of profound weariness, as if he had been tired for a very, very long time. Lucas released his mother's hand and walked directly toward the stranger. The man knelt down to meet the boy at eye level. For almost a full minute, neither of them spoke. The adults watched in stunned silence, afraid to breathe, afraid to break whatever was happening between this child and this mysterious carpenter. Then Lucas reached out with his small hands and took the man's hands in his own. Gently, carefully, he turned them over. There they were, perfect circular scars on both palms, smooth, old, and unmistakable. They looked as though something had passed completely through the flesh and healed long ago. Father Richardson felt his legs begin to tremble. Catherine covered her mouth with her hand, tears already streaming down her face. Stephen stood frozen, his dead phone still clutched uselessly in his grip. "Why did you search for me, little one?" the man asked. His voice was gentle, without any identifiable accent. Because people need to know that you never left, Lucas answered. That you're still helping, even though you don't want them to see you. The carpenter smiled sadly and looked up at the adults. I'm not who you think I am. I'm just a man who tries to do good. These scars are from an accident years ago. But George Bowman stepped forward, his voice firm, despite the emotion cracking through it. You healed my wife from cancer. The doctors had no explanation, none. The man shook his head slowly. I only prayed with her. Her faith healed her, not me. Father Richardson gathered his courage and asked if he could pose some questions. The carpenter, who identified himself simply as Emmanuel, invited them inside. The workshop was sparse, a workbench, old tools hanging on the walls, wood shavings scattered across the floor, and a simple cot in the corner. There were no photographs, no personal documents, not even a mobile phone. It was the dwelling of someone who had deliberately removed himself from the modern world. Father Richardson asked how long Emmanuel had lived here. 3 years in this place, he replied. But I have been in America for much longer. Catherine asked the question that burned in everyone's mind. Where do you come from? Do you have any family? Emmanuel lowered his gaze. I have no known family. I was born far from here, in a land that no longer exists as I remember it. Father Richardson noticed something peculiar about the man's speech. Although his English was flawless, he occasionally used archaic expressions, phrases that hadn't been common for centuries. When the priest pointed this out, Emmanuel simply smiled. I learned the language long ago from old scholars. I suppose I retained their manner of speaking. Lucas pointed at a small wooden cross sitting on the workbench. Did you make that? Emmanuel nodded. I make crosses to give to those who need them. The wood reminds me of my father. He was also a carpenter. Father Richardson felt a shiver run through him. He asked about the scars on Emmanuel's feet. After a moment's hesitation, the man removed his simple leather sandals. There they were, identical circular marks on the tops of both feet, perfectly symmetrical. A work accident, Emmanuel explained. Rusted nails went through my feet and hands when scaffolding collapsed years ago. Stephen, who had remained skeptical throughout, finally spoke up. Why don't you have any identification? No driver's license, no social security card, nothing? Emmanuel answered calmly. My documents were lost long ago. I live without them because I don't need them. I own nothing. I don't vote. I exist in no registry. I simply work, help when I can, and move on when I must. Father Richardson made a proposal that would set everything in motion. He asked if Emmanuel would submit to medical, linguistic, and historical examinations. If you truly aren't who Lucas believes you are, the priest said, science will prove it. 3 days later, on April 23rd, Emmanuel agreed, under one condition. Everything had to remain private. No media, no social networks, no public attention. Father Richardson coordinated the examinations with the University of Pennsylvania. The first expert to examine Emmanuel was Dr. Hans Meyer, a linguist specializing in ancient Semitic languages. He asked Emmanuel to read texts in Biblical Hebrew, Imperial Aramaic, and Koine Greek. The results left the academic speechless. This man doesn't just read first-century Aramaic fluently, Dr. Meyer wrote in his confidential report. He uses dialects that only appear in the Dead Sea Scrolls. He corrects translation errors in modern Bible texts and explains cultural contexts that only a native speaker of that era could possibly know. Dr. Meyer had asked Emmanuel to recite the Lord's Prayer. Emmanuel did so in Galilean Aramaic, a dialect that had been extinct for nearly 2,000 years. His pronunciation was exact, his intonation natural. "There is no possibility that a self-taught person could know this," the linguist concluded. "I have spent my entire career studying these languages, and this man speaks them as if he grew up with them." On April 28th, Dr. Monica Wagner, a hematologist at Penn Medicine, took blood samples from Emmanuel. The analysis revealed that his blood type was AB negative, the rarest in the world, found in less than 1% of the global population. But what truly disturbs Dr. Wagner was the cellular examination. The results indicated anomalous cell aging patterns that made no scientific sense. "The cells show markers that absolutely do not correspond with the subject's apparent age," she wrote. "It is as though his body is far older than his appearance suggests. I have never encountered anything like this in my career." On May 3rd, Dr. Klaus Steiner, an archaeologist specializing in the Near East at Princeton University, examined Emmanuel's scars under ultraviolet light. His conclusion was categorical. "These marks did not come from a work accident. These are old wounds that healed decades ago, with trauma patterns consistent with Roman crucifixion. Iron nails, approximately 5 centimeters in length, driven through the intercarpal space in the wrists and between the metatarsal bones of the feet. The positioning is anatomically precise." Dr. Steiner included detailed photographs in his report. The wounds matched historical records of crucifixion methods used in 1st century Palestine. Despite all precautions, the results began to leak. On May 10th, a Facebook group of university professors shared photos of Emmanuel. By May 15th, the hashtag #TheCarpenter of Bethlehem was trending across social media. Thousands of people traveled to Bethlehem hoping to see him, but Emmanuel had vanished. George Bowman confirmed that he had left on May 8th, leaving behind only a note written in Aramaic. "The truth needs no spectacle. Love seeks no worship." On May 18th, Father Richardson held a press conference at the Philadelphia Archdiocese headquarters. He presented the scientific reports and stated, "We have documented a case that defies conventional explanation. A man with impossible knowledge of dead languages. Scars consistent with crucifixion. We are not claiming he is who many believe him to be, but we cannot deny it either." The news exploded internationally, and while the world debated, Lucas Sullivan fell gravely ill. On May 20th, he developed a fever exceeding 104 degrees Fahrenheit. For 3 days, the child was delirious, repeating phrases in Aramaic that neither of his parents could understand. Doctors at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia could find no medical cause for his condition. His body showed no signs of infection, no inflammation, nothing that could explain the raging fever. Dr. Meyer was called in to translate the boy's words. What Lucas was saying over and over again was, "He will return when the crowd is ready, at the place of the mother who wept for her children." Dr. Meyer recognized the reference immediately. It pointed to the Cathedral Basilica of Saints Peter and Paul, Philadelphia's mother church, the seat of the Archdiocese. On May 24th at 2:17 a.m., Lucas's fever vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. He woke up, looked at his exhausted parents, and spoke clearly. "He talked to me. He said that on June 2nd, at the cathedral, he will show the truth. But after that, he will leave forever." The news spread within hours. On June 2nd, 2025, over 100,000 people gathered around the Cathedral Basilica on the Benjamin Franklin Parkway. Police had to cordon off the entire area. The Archbishop authorized a special prayer vigil inside the church. At 6:30 p.m., Emmanuel appeared. He walked through the crowd on the cathedral plaza, dressed in his simple carpenter's clothes. The sea of people parted before him in stunned silence. Some fell to their knees. Others reached out, desperate to touch him. A woman in a wheelchair, Rosa, who suffered from advanced multiple sclerosis, reached toward him as he passed. Her trembling fingers brushed the hem of his shirt. Eyewitnesses filmed what happened next. Rosa's face transformed. She gripped the arms of her wheelchair, pushed herself upward, and stood. She threw aside her walking aids and took her first steps in 6 years, tears streaming down her face. The video would be viewed 40 million times within 18 hours. Emmanuel entered the cathedral and sat on the steps leading to the altar. He spoke for 47 minutes in English, Aramaic, and Latin. His voice, without any amplification, was crystal clear throughout the entire church. "I did not come to be worshipped," he said. "I came to remind you that God has never abandoned his children. Every act of true love is my presence. Do not seek me in temples of gold. Seek me in the hungry, the sick, the forgotten." At 7:14 p.m., something inexplicable occurred. The thousands of white roses decorating the cathedral suddenly began releasing an intense fragrance of spikenard oil, the precious oil with which Mary Magdalene had anointed Christ's feet. Laboratory analyses later confirmed that the scent did not originate from the flowers themselves, but seemed to permeate the air from an unknown source. Over 400 people reported spontaneous healings in that moment. Emmanuel rose, looked out at the crowd, and spoke his final words. "I leave you 3 signs. First, my blood contains a genetic map that science cannot explain. Second, on the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem, beneath the stone marked with the ancient cross, you will find a document that predicted this encounter. Third, Lucas drew my face before he ever met me, because God prepared him." He paused, his golden brown eyes sweeping across the thousands of faces before him. "Love one another as I have loved you." He walked toward the cathedral's side exit. The crowd tried to follow, but in the chaos, he disappeared. Security cameras showed him entering a corridor with no other exit. He never emerged from the other end. He had simply vanished. Weeks later, an archaeological expedition in Jerusalem found the parchment exactly where Emmanuel had said it would be. Carbon-14 dating confirmed it was authentic, originating from the 1st century. The next text described, in precise detail, a meeting in a great cathedral by a mighty river, and a child who would draw faces. Genetic studies of Emmanuel's blood revealed a Y chromosome with markers that exist in no known human population, along with telomeres suggesting extreme cellular regeneration far beyond normal human capacity. Lucas Sullivan no longer draws faces. Today, he lives a normal life in Philadelphia with his family. But every year on June 2nd, for exactly 11 minutes, the fragrance of spikenard oil returns to the Cathedral Basilica of Saints Peter and Paul. And in the streets between Philadelphia and Bethlehem, people continue to report encounters with a humble carpenter who helps without asking for anything in return. When asked his name, he simply replies, "It doesn't matter who I am. What matters is that you love."